welcome to the Get Right with Miss Wright. It has been a long time, parents. I know that we just have had some delays this year, right? 2021 still has a little bit of 2020, with the pandemic and getting things together. And then we had the winter storm, but nevertheless, we are right back at it. So today is a very special episode designed just for you, and it has to deal with growing as a reading family. So I have brought my lovely campus reading instructional coach. Her name is Tamera Cornelsen, and she is brilliant, y'all. And she is going to give us all great fun facts about reading and how you can grow as a reading family at home and the importance of reading, and really dig deep, because we know that time is valuable. We know that, you have a lot on your plate. We know that some of you, may have been laid off, maybe not have all the materials, maybe you're staying with someone else. And it's hard, right? Life is hard right now. And so, there's only so much you can do when, your child is, maybe struggling with reading at school, and you're like, I don't know how to help him or her. And so hopefully today, with some guidance, she can tell us some easy, important things to do at home, and then also give us some suggestions on where to go or how to ask questions to the kid's teacher, your child's teacher, in order to help him or her. So I'm going to first let Tammy, of course, introduce herself and then talk about her role here at Bradley.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Ashley. So I'm Tamera Cornelsen. I'm the instructional coach here at Bradley Elementary. This is my second year here at Bradley. Prior to this, I spent 5 years as a district instructional coach, so I worked at the district level with the language arts department. And previous to that, I spent, I believe, 12 years in the classroom at Ford Elementary. So I've been in the district a total of, I think this is my 18th year. So it's been a while. Here at Bradley, I'm the campus instructional coach, so I cover all content areas, but the majority of my time right now is spent on language arts. So mostly I support teachers and students in the areas of reading, writing, word study, grammar, that sort of thing. I wear lots of hats. I develop, I prepare the assessments and things, but the most important things that I do are I go into classrooms and I work with students to support them in reading and writing, and I work with teachers. So my role is to help students become better readers and writers, and also to help teachers become better reading and writing teachers. And so hopefully through all of that work that we do collaboratively together, it grows everyone here at Bradley.
Yes, and parents, if you don't know, she is in and out of classrooms, also meeting with us as an admin team, really to move our campus forward. So we are very blessed to have her. All right, so Tammy, first and foremost, right, we have reading and we have writing. And I'm so glad that you said language arts, because I think some people get confused and maybe we only just sometimes focus on reading, but it's really important that language arts does incorporate that writing, and they're both important. So let us know first, why is there so much emphasis on reading? Why is it so important to read at home daily?
Well, I think reading gets the huge emphasis that it does because it drives all other areas, right? I mean, in order for students to be successful in science or social studies, even to be successful in math anymore, students have to be able to read. And so reading is crucial. We want to see our students grow as readers. And one way that parents can help support that is by reading at home with your child, making sure that you carve out a little bit of time every day for children to read at home. They do lots of reading here at school, and that's important. But one of the most important things that you can do to support your child as a reader is to read with them at home. I'm going to refer to my notes here, but I found some statistics that talk about reading volume, or the quantity of reading that students do, and how that translates into their academic growth. And the research shows that for a student who reads 20 minutes a day, they encounter 1,800,000 words per year through that reading. And most of the time, they're going to score in around the 90th percentile on standardized tests. Not that that's why we read. Those tests are not the be-all and end-all. They matter, but they're not the most important thing. But the byproduct of doing that good, authentic reading is that kids tend to perform better on those assessments. For a child that reads 5 minutes a day, and that's real reading, not, sitting with the book in front of them, but really, daydreaming and zoning out, thinking about other things, but real reading, 5 minutes a day, they're going to encounter 282,000 words per year in text, and they're going to, on average, score around the 50th percentile. For students who only read 1 minute a day or none, they're going to encounter 8,000 words or less over the course of a year and score typically around the 10th percentile. Now, of course, there are, exceptions to that, but that's kind of that's the trends that the research found. So, and that doesn't include like the instruction. That's just reading, holding a book in hand and spending time reading that book and thinking about that reading.
Can I say, Tammy, I really liked how you emphasize that's not the instruction piece, that's just simply reading. Because I think sometimes when it comes to parents, like, yes, the school system is the school system, and our teachers are teaching reading, but just to have authentic, just picking up a book and sitting and really gaining that knowledge is an ongoing process that is much needed, because they don't have that luxury to do that all day here at school. It's like only a certain amount of time.
Right. Our schedules are full of so many different things, and all classrooms here at Bradley get independent reading time, where students sit and independently read from books that they choose on their levels, and books that they can be successful at. But any additional reading that they can do at home is only going to make things better. So absolutely, what you do at home with your readers matters.
I think going into reading at home. And then reading in the classroom, sometimes there is this confusion, or sometimes that there's this stress with reading levels. Because I do want to go back to what you were saying, even like when we're looking at STAR, like, just the achievement. It's just like, I want my kid to pass STAR or pass the test, and that's not what it's about. But if you could just go a little bit into how our district looks at reading levels, like what are reading levels, talk about why they're important, and then just, how do we know, like, if a text is a good fit or not? Because as a mom, you're asking me to make sure my child reads at home. I'm going to give my child a book, Tammy. But,
Sure.
How do I know that that's the proper, book, if it's a good fit? What levels am I supposed to be looking at? I'm not a teacher. If you could just kind of give us some information on that.
Yeah, sure. So reading levels, they're a tool. They're a tool for teachers to use, first and foremost. In our district, in Conroe ISD, we use an assessment called the Benchmark Assessment System, or you might hear your child's teacher call it BAS or BAS. That's the assessment that we use to get those reading levels. When we do that assessment, the child will read from a leveled book, usually orally for a little bit. The teacher listens to them read to see how their oral reading sounds, and then asks a series of questions to find out, did they understand the book? And if they struggle, we go down levels. If they soar through it with no struggle at all, we go up levels until we find that just right level, that book where it's not perfect, but they're comfortable in it, and they're able to read, and they're able to comprehend and understand. We do that assessment 3 times a year here in Conroe ISD, so it's not something we're doing all the time. Although teachers are monitoring levels all the time, because we want to make sure kids are in just right books. Using the data that comes from that assessment, we give students books to read. We encourage them to choose books from certain baskets in the classroom library, or certain levels, maybe in Epic or Sora, or some of those other online book resources. And I think my thing with reading levels is I want to caution about too much conversation with children about what level they are, just because we want children to self-identify as a reader, not as a level. Yes, Jimmy might be a reader who reads on a level H, but he isn't a level H like he is, but we don't want him to think, oh, I'm only a level H. That we want him to think, I'm a reader who can do all these things. I'm a reader who can read the words in this book. I'm a reader who can tell you about the characters. I'm a reader who can read smooth, just like I talk. we would want them to identify with those reading behaviors, as we call them, things that good readers do, and things that they're learning and growing into as readers. But those levels, they do tell us a lot, because they tell us what that child probably can do as a reader, because there's a really thick book that teachers use. It's about, like it could be a doorstop, big book, full of really good information. But some of the information in that book, it's called the Continuum, is descriptors of readers at certain levels. And what that really means is that if a child reads on a level P, then these are kind of the things that they can likely do or need to work on to jump up to the next level. Or if they read on a level I, these are the things that they probably can do. We can look to see if they are wanting to move into that level J, they need to be able to do X, Y, Z in order to make that little jump, if that makes sense. So yes. Reading levels with the BAS, they're alphabetical. It starts at an A down in kindergarten. It goes through a Z up in like 6th grade. And our children are anywhere along that trajectory. And the support we give them at school and the strategies we teach them and the skills that we give them help them to grow up through those levels. But the reading that they do in class as well as the reading that they do at home with you as parents, as family members, supports them too. Because research has shown that students strongly benefit from reading instruction. But one of the two of the most helpful things we can give to our students to help them grow as readers is good fit books that they can read without too much struggle, and time to read. That kind of the 3 prongs of reading is time to read, good fit books, and reading instruction. But even without that reading instruction, kids can grow as readers just by spending time in books that are just right for them. So not to say that the teacher's role is not important, it absolutely is. But that just goes to show how important the role of a parent at home can be as well.
You know, that makes me think about the pandemic when it happened, right? Because, you know, for so many weeks, you know, we didn't really just have teachers in the way that we needed. But now, you know, Tammy, you providing us with this perspective on, you know, saying, you know, the whole time to read and good fit books, we can still move forward and our kids can still identify themselves as a reader. I really think that's good information for our parents. I really like what I'm hearing, because I love the emphasis on just having kids to still take that identity and that confidence that I am a reader, no matter what. No matter
right.
what the reading level is, I am a reader. Yes, I might struggle, and I'm trying to achieve my next challenge, and I think that's what we all do in life with all of our subjects, all of our content areas. But I think it's really important for parents to know, and I hope y'all are listening, that, you know, we're not focusing on, you know, well, my kid only reads on a 2nd grade level, or my kid only reads on a 1st grade level. That there's some comfort into knowing that it is okay, and that this is just how we're going to move forward. And what I'm listening to Tammy tell me is that, you know, by making the time to read, and you just said it earlier before, like the statistics with the number of minutes, we have that. That's something that's doable. And, you know, how does that conversation go with Tammy finding a good fit book? How would a parent know, well, where do I get that? Where do I go?
Right. So for good fit books, most of the time you're not going to know the level of a book, right? The books that we have in our literacy library that our teachers use for guided reading, they come in bags, and I've written all the levels on the books and on the bags, and so teachers know what level they're pulling to work in small groups with their students. But the books that are in their classroom libraries, they've looked and found levels for some. Some books we just don't have levels for. Books that you might have at home in your child's room or playroom, you probably don't know the levels. You go to the public library, they're not marked with the level that book is. So that can be a challenge. And so there's some tips for ways that you can determine if a book is a just right book for your child. And one way is to listen to them read. I just ask them, read a few pages for me and see if they can do it. We don't expect perfection, so they don't have to be able to read every single word of a given book in order to read it successfully at that level. The rule of thumb kind of is if they can read it with 95% or higher accuracy, then they can probably read it independently. So that means, 5 errors for every 100 words or so. That's not so bad. So first, can they read the book to you? But we have to understand that reading isn't just oral reading. There are lots of students out there who read beautifully. Yes. You listen to them read and wow, what a great reader.
And we're going to talk about that accuracy. Yes.
Yes, and we are. But if they can't tell you about the book, if they can't recall anything that they read, then that's not really the level they're at. That just means that they have a higher strength and accuracy and their comprehension's a little weaker. So that's what they need to work on. So you want to find books that they can read for the most part, accurately, with a few errors, but also that they can tell you about, that they're able to give you a retell of that book, to tell you about the characters, about the setting, about what happened, the events in the book, or if it's a nonfiction book, they're able to tell you a little bit about what they learned.
Awesome.
So that can be a gauge for you.
Awesome. Well, that leads us right into, the next question with parents is that when we talk about genres, right? Like we hear that word and then some people are like, what is that? Like, there are different types of books that are put in different types of categories. And so when your kid's coming home and saying that I love these types of books, we want kids to not only, and I'm going to let Tammy get into it, but parents just dive down into one type of book that may just only have fiction characters or, the characters are just animals. We want them to be able to read across all different types of text. So tell us, what are genres and why is it important to read across all of those different genres and how they will help our students? Sure.
So genres are just categories of books. That's kind of the way that they're organized in public libraries. They're different kinds of books. For example, you have fiction books that are made up, stories about characters. You've got nonfiction books. And then those are sort of the two main umbrellas of genre, fiction and nonfiction. But within fiction, you've got books that are fantasy books, that have, characters that couldn't really exist in real life, unicorns and fairies and things like that. And then you've got realistic fiction, which are stories that are fiction, but they're events and characters and things that really could take place, that kids can really relate to. Historical fiction, stories that are made up, but that happened in real historical time periods. And then you've got nonfiction. Nonfiction books can include informational books about, snakes or dogs or space or rocks. But nonfiction can also be poetry. Poetry is another genre, and lots of kids like to read poetry, especially silly, fun poetry like Shel Silverstein. And then also we have a genre that we look at here at school that you might not have heard of before. It's called literary nonfiction. And so literary nonfiction is sort of a crossover genre. It's books that are written in story format, but they really did happen. So it's like telling the story of something that happened in the past or an event that's happening currently, but it's telling it in story form instead of informational and factually. So those are just some of the genres. There are many more. And I think it's important for kids to get exposure to all of those genres. Not all children are going to like all genres. They're going to have their preferences for what they enjoy reading when they self-select their books. But it's good for them to get exposure across all of them. It helps them to be more well-rounded readers. It helps them to learn about the world around them. It helps them to read about characters that they can relate to, that they can learn lessons from, and it helps them to just see the world through different eyes, I think. One of the best ways to help kids to transition from one genre to the next is just to take them to the library, let them look, let them browse and find books, or go online to some of our online digital libraries and look for books that interest them. If it's a lot of times, don't want to stereotype, but a lot of times our boys like nonfiction books because they want to read about those things that interest them, motorcycles or dinosaurs or sharks or something. Girls tend to like to get caught up in the stories. Not always true. There are girls that love nonfiction, boys that really love getting lost in stories. So it goes both ways, but sometimes kids get pigeonholed into one of those types of genres. And so we want to help them say, you know what, that's great, you keep reading that, but why don't we try one of these books too, just to make them a little more well-rounded as a reader, because they're going to encounter all kinds of text as they grow up.
I'm glad that you made the emphasis on library, because I was like, yes, she did. So, parents, I would, say that it's really important to visit, your public library. I know it's COVID, and I don't know the proper protocol for our libraries right now. I'm pretty sure it's about wearing a mask, but just like Tammy said, we do have those online digital books that are free, and just to let you know, parents, like, the district spends lots of money, and so we want you to use those resources so that you don't have to go out and, buy your own subscriptions and having to, spend lots and lots of monies to get programs and softwares that have books. There are a lot of available free resources. So we talked about good fit books. We talked about reading levels. And so now we know just, finding the good fit book, making sure my kid feels confident as a reader. So now my kid's reading, right? I'm at home. My kid's reading. Talk about accuracy, because we mentioned that just before, right? I'm starting to notice my baby's struggling with words. So how can I help my child at home with accuracy and with words and with reading? And what is that? What is accuracy?
Sure. So accuracy is accurate reading of the words. Like when I'm reading the words, I say all the words correctly. I'm able to, we call it decoding, figure out what those words are. Our ultimate goal is for students to be able to read those words with automaticity, or automatically. They see it, they can say it, and they just keep on moving smoothly through. But right now, our students in elementary levels, a lot of them struggle still with decoding. They need help and support as they work through those words that they come to that they don't know. And this is the reason that I said good fit books. They should be able to read automatically or smoothly about 95-ish% of the words, because if they're getting bogged down trying to figure out every word or every second or third word they come to, they're not making any headway in that book, and they're not really going to comprehend anything. So it's important that that book has a good fit. We want there to be a little bit of struggle, because that's where we learn. We learn when we're struggling and working through something. So having a couple of words on a page, a few words on a page that the student has to work through, that is absolutely fine. We just don't want a lot of words that they have to work through or struggle through. If I could give one tip about how to support your child as a reader when they come to those words they don't know, I would encourage you, rather than telling the child the word, rather than, just giving it to them, ask them, what could you do to figure that out? Because teachers are giving lots of reading strategies here at school for ways to work through a word. They can look for parts of the word that they know. If I see the word "and" in the middle of a word, then I know that I'm going to hear "and" when I come to that A and D, like as in hand. So if I'm a first grader and I see the word hand, and I don't know that word, that's new to me. I see "and" in that word, I know "and." So I put the H on the beginning, I can read hand. So finding word parts. When you get to be in third grade or fourth grade and you're reading those really large words, those multisyllabic words, that little "and" can still be found in some of those big words. And so finding little chunks is one way that students can work through a word.
I like how you didn't say, because sometimes our go-to, especially old school, is like, just sound it out. Just sound it out, right? That's just sound it out. And if you ever notice, parents, like, our kids may be like, I don't even know where to start. So I love how you first ask the question, what could you do to help yourself figure out that word? Even asking, like, are there clues? Because they need to be able to use the things at school in the class when they're at home. Because I get so excited, but you talked about it. It's like those reading behaviors, when I am reading and I'm getting stuck, I need to be able to use a strategy that my teachers taught me so that I can keep going.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you're right, Ashley, about when we tell students sound it out. That's oftentimes a go-to. Sometimes teachers even forget and say, you just sound it out. But the truth is there are so many, many words in the English language that cannot be sounded out. Students have to work through it other ways by thinking about word parts and what they know about blends and letter combinations, like the word phone, phone. You can't sound that out, right? I mean,
no.
Exactly. So students have to know, oh, I see a ph at the beginning of that word. I know ph makes the f sound, the sound, and I see an e on the end. And when there's an e on the end, a lot of times that means that e is silent, and it's going to make that vowel say its name. So I know that o is going to say o, not because that e on the end. So they need to know like those phonics rules, really, and they've been working on those in class. Those are things that teachers are instructing on. So if you can support them by breaking down the word rather than just saying sound it out or telling them the word, that's a growing moment for them as a reader. And if you are a parent who's feeling like, well, I don't know what to say, I don't know what any of those strategies are, get in contact with your child's teacher because they'll have a list of strategies that have been taught, that they've been working on. You're welcome to contact me. Ashley can give you my contact information, and I can send you some basic strategies or prompts that you can say to your child as a reader, because giving them the tools to work through the word themselves is going to benefit them much more so than just giving them the word.
I really admire that you said that, because you took the words like right out of my mouth, because I know some parents are just, maybe just sitting there and just like, I don't even know what strategy. Then what, right? Like when you're like, well, what could you use to figure out that word? Mama, I don't remember. And so, the purpose of doing this show together is to encourage and empower you as moms and dads, grandmas, as you have your kids, is to collaborate with the teacher so that our kids can see that we are like, working all together to be, become this reading family, and we're all on the same page and we're all learning, which is really important. So they're getting that piece at school, but they know at home, like, it's going to be supported as well. And so, I couldn't stress enough, and I know Tammy's going to say it, we want you to be successful. So you might have to ask, like, I don't know, give me some questions, give me some prompts. I am going to get with Tammy, maybe, later create a little handout on some just different questions that you can ask when you're asking your kid to, retell the story, especially because we've done this talk show before last year. But I think that is really important, for you to really get with your child's teacher and just be aware. And even if you have, say for instance, and Tammy, tell me if I'm wrong, but if you have like a fourth grader and you have a first grader and you have a kindergarten, some of those same strategies you can still ask, just in a different way, for whatever book that they have.
Sure, yeah. Like I was saying, that's a perfect example. That A and D and sound can be in hand, but it can be in much larger words as well. So a lot of those strategies, they work across all grade levels. Okay,
so moving into our next, let's talk about fluency. So what is fluency? I know that's a quick one. Why does that matter? What is it?
Okay, so fluency is just the rate and the sound, I guess I could say, for how reading sounds. Like when students are first learning to read, oftentimes they read word by word by word, and so there's long pauses between each word. There's no expression. Fluency is correcting all of that. Fluency is reading at a just right speed, not too fast, not too slow. A lot of times our kids think, oh, the faster I read, the better I read. No, I tell them the information doesn't go in your brain when you read that fast. So slow down, but we don't want to slow down so much that we sound like a robot, right? So it's finding that balance on the speed, but it's also reading like I speak. So adding a little bit of expression in. If I'm reading a fiction book and I'm reading dialogue, things that the characters are saying, I want to say it like the character would say it. If the character is excited, I want to read it in an excited voice. If the character's mad, I want to read it in a mad voice. And then in addition, it's also paying attention to punctuation. We want to help kids to notice punctuation in text, because if they see an exclamation mark, then they know to read it with a certain tone of voice, whether it's excitement or anger. when they see a period, they should know that I need to pause right here and not run right through that period on into the next sentence. Question mark, I need to bring my voice up a little bit because I'm asking a question. And then when I see quotation marks, the two little marks around the dialogue, I know that, oh, a character is speaking here, so I need to read this in a certain way. And that even ties to nonfiction. In nonfiction, we'll see things like bolded words, yes, where they're in the darker print. And if I see bolded words in dark print, I know to read that word with emphasis and to pay attention to it because the author's teaching me something here. So fluency is about putting all of those things together and reading like a smooth, expert reader.
All right, as we get into our last portion, so breathe, parents, you're like 30 minutes in, you're doing good. All right, so we've talked about, let's go back, we've got our good fit, books that Tammy has talked about. We're not going to focus on reading levels. We know we're going to find different types of genres in our library or in digital text. We know that if our kids are struggling with every single word, we want to also give them strategies. We may need to change the book, but we talked about accuracy, how it's important that they're, not having too much trouble, but just knowing how to help. Fluency, that smooth, normal rate. And last but not least, parents, the big kahuna, comprehension. Understanding. It's like, I feel like, Timmy, like you do all of that work and then it like, at the end, it's like, it doesn't even matter because if you don't understand it, that's a really big problem. So really just kind of hit the home run with comprehension. Like, what are some great ways to see if a kid, if my child is really understanding the story and or how to help my child understand what he or she is reading.
Sure. So yeah, comprehension is the big kahuna in reading. It's really the hardest part for most kids. They learn to work through the decoding unless there are other issues in place, like dyslexia or something like that. We have students who struggle in those areas, but for our readers that don't have those particular struggles, they usually can catch on to that decoding, to that accuracy piece. Their fluency gets put into place, but then you ask them, so tell me about that book. What did you read? And their response might be, I don't know. Or, well, it was about a dog. What can you tell me about that dog? And then they have to pause and they have to think. And so they're reading the words, they're reading it smoothly. And so a lot of times parents who don't know will think, well, my child can read that book. I listened to him. It sounded great. And it did, because that child has 2 of the 3 parts of reading in place. But reading is 3-pronged. It's accuracy, like we talked about, getting through those words. It's fluency, reading it smoothly with expression, paying attention to punctuation. And it's comprehension. It's understanding what I read. And if I don't understand what I read, it doesn't really matter how smooth it sounds or if I read all the words right or not, because I didn't get anything out of it as a reader. And so comprehension is huge. We want to make sure that we foster and support comprehension. Some of the ways that you can do that at home, parents, is by asking questions. After your child has read to you, or if they're an older child and you don't need to listen to them read anymore because that accuracy is in a good place, then when they finished reading on their own, ask them, so tell me about the book you read. What was it about? You ask them to tell you things like what happened at the beginning, in the middle, and the end, because a good retell starts at the beginning and goes through to the end. It doesn't have to have every little detail that happened, but the main things. What are the most important things that happened in this book? See if they can tell you that. Can they tell you about the characters? Do they know who the characters are? Do they know how those characters were feeling at the big points of the story? Are they able to talk to you a little bit about how that character changed if they're an older reader, a second going into 4th grade? Are they noticing that the character changed? Maybe the character was one way in the beginning, but by the end of the book, the character was a different way because of the experiences that character had. They changed. Or what are the interactions between the characters? How does this character feel about this one? What do they do together? Do they get along? Do they not? How do they impact one another? So thinking about those sorts of things. Can they tell you about the setting? Where does the book take place? And why is that important? A lot of times we just ask, what's the setting? Oh, it's outside.
Right.
As a lower elementary teacher for many years, I would get, what is the setting? Oh, they were outside. No,
like being in a movie, kind of. Like we watch movies, especially like in this time, right? Lots of, Netflix, lots of YouTubes, and lots of videos. And so, parents, if we can take that to our books that our kids are reading and just be as much interested, like, oh, tell me about it. Was it good? Did you like it? I really feel, and Tammy, tell me if I'm wrong. When we invest and show our interest in, our children's reading, like, then they can also sense the importance, and they also feel connected to want to read more because we're showing that interest. And just having these conversations, the social emotional aspect, I want to let you know, parents, is that's your bonding time. You might not think of it that way, and I know some of y'all may, have lots of things to do. So Tammy's telling you all these different types of questions to ask in your retailer. And some of you may be like, yeah, my life's not like that. I've got 5 kids, Ashley. I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm moving around. But even if you're sitting with your child for at least, 5 to 20 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes, even if you can, having them read a little bit, as long as it's a good fit book. And while you're cooking, like, hey, how was that book? Sarah, did you really like it? While you're cooking, maybe changing the baby's diaper, you're still just having a conversation as a family. And if you have all of your kids, maybe making it a certain time of the day where everybody shuts everything down and, everybody's reading. You may be still doing stuff, Mom, or you may still be doing stuff, Dad, but at least your kids know this is the time where I'm reading, and then when I come back, my parents are going to ask me about it, and I want to talk about it because it's fun, for whatever it is. So, I really want to, make sure our parents know to feel comfortable, but that this is growing as a reading family and still, holding and building that relationship of, the meaning of education, the meaning of life, and just us coming together and having new ways to communicate. So reading is one.
Yes, absolutely. And you don't have to ask all of those questions every time. Just have a conversation about what they read. If it's nonfiction, ask them what they learned, what was important. Those kinds of things. I heard a quote. I can't recall where I heard it, but it said that there are no children who don't like reading. There are just children who haven't found the right book yet. And so, a lot of times kids will say, I don't like reading. I hate to read. And so I would say that they think they don't, but really they just haven't found the right book yet. And once they find a book that hooks them, a lot of times that will lead them down the path of becoming a reader. If I can just share, that happened with my daughter. She's a grown adult now. She is actually a second grade teacher here in the district. But as a fourth grader, she struggled. She didn't enjoy reading. Her problem was fluency. She was a very slow, methodical reader. It took her a long time to get through chapter books, and she just said, I just don't like to read. And we actually started a little plan, and maybe this would work with some of you. I made a deal with her that for every book she read for herself, I would read a book to her. And so every night we would sit down, and she would do her reading first. She would be reading in her own book, and then I would sit and I would read a chapter out of a book. I get it. I was a working mom too. I'm still a mom, but I was a working mom at that time, and trying to balance that, grading the papers at home and making dinner and doing those things, and also helping her grow. But we would carve out enough time each night to read, usually about a chapter, and she would be like, Mom, can we read another one? Nope, we're going to save it for tomorrow. Just a little bit of time. But me reading to her from those chapter books, because even big kids love to be read to. I would read to her from those chapter books. She began to get more and more invested in the books, in the characters that we were reading about. And she was growing herself because she was, as I would read a book, she would have to read a book. And then we found a book series. It was a Warrior Cat series. They're still around today, but she said, Mom, I want you to read another one of those. And I said, no, if you want to read that book, then you need to read it. Let's pick a different series. And so we moved on to another series, but she latched onto that series, and she read the next book and the next book and the next book. And before you knew it, I wasn't reading to her every night anymore because she was so engrossed in her own books that she was reading to herself every night. Wow. And she got hooked on that series. And And it made her want to read more and more and more to find out what happened in the next book and the next book and the next book, because series books always are almost always revolve around the same characters.
Yes.
Going through experiences together. So you get invested in a set of characters, and then you want to keep reading about them. That's a way to hook kids as readers. And so finding a series that works for them oftentimes is what it takes to blossom them into a reader that loves books.
I mean, my genre, I'll tell you, Tammy, was mystery. I just love mystery books, and Goosebumps, that was my jam. That was my jam. You give me Goosebumps book, I'll just read them, all. I'm glad that you asked that, because one of our questions was, like, my kid hates reading. How can I motivate him or her? So, for some of y'all that, just missed it, or just, I know you're probably moving around in the kitchen as you're listening to this. It's really important to ask, find out what they're interested in and look at some different series. I mean, there's plenty of different types of books nowadays, I really honestly feel, Tammy, than back then, that are appealing to kids. We had the whole Diary of a Wimpy Kid, there's just, always all of those different types where we're talking about, I will say throwback Babysitter's Club. Or, I don't know, what's out now, Tammy? We've got...
So, right now, a lot of kids in the lower grades like Piggy and Elephant.
Oh, yes!
Yeah, Piggy and Elephant are great. And first graders, most first graders can read Piggy and Elephant independently or with a little bit of help. In second grade, Magic Tree House. There's a series called The Princess Black, I think it's called, that kids really like. There's a publisher of books called Branches, and almost all the Branches books kids really enjoy. And I know that the Branches books and the Princess Black books can frequently be found in Scholastic book orders. So if your child's teacher sends those book orders home, that's a good way, if it's affordable for you, to get some books into your home without spending as much as you might at Barnes & Noble or something. The Magic Tree House, I don't know if I mentioned that one. That's a series of books, been around for a while, but there are so many of them, and kids get hooked into that. I wrote down a list of a few. There are just so many that go from there. There are certain authors that kids get hooked on as well. Sometimes it's not a series, but it's an author. Right now, I know Catherine Applegate is a really popular author. For our older kids, she wrote The One and Only Ivan. And then that follow-up book, I can't remember the name of it now, but there's a sequel to it, and Wish Tree, and lots of books like that. Our students have been reading in third grade. Oh goodness, it just went out of my head. I'm sorry.
I know some of us parents are like, "Woo, that's a lot of books."
I know, lots of books, but that just means there are lots of options. Not that you have to get all of them, but just there are so many options out there, and just finding one that works for your child often is what it takes.
And I love how, please utilize Tammy. Email her if you get stuck, and just say, I'm just overwhelmed. I've got, 3 kids, and they're all different or at grade levels. I don't even know where to start. That's, our job. We want to be able to help you and, point you in the right direction. All right, so our last question for the show today, are online books, Tammy, better than regular handheld books? Because I know some parents are like, well, I feel like, the whole digital, looking on the computer for too long, which one is, more beneficial, or are they the same? What's your take?
So both of them are, full of text, and they're books that kids can fall in love with and get lost in. My personal preference is for kids to have books that they can hold in their hands. That would be my number one go-to, is a book that they can hold and turn the pages of and read and enjoy. But that isn't always possible.
Right.
If your students are face-to-face learners here at school, they get exposure to all of those books in their classroom library, and they're holding books in their hands all the time. If your child is a remote learner, then they don't have access to that school library right now. And maybe you don't have a lot of books in your home, and that is okay. There are online libraries that you can access. So I don't want you to feel like, well, I don't have a lot of books for my child to hold and read. There are other alternatives. There's Epic, There's Sora, which can be accessed through the SSO. Your students have access through it right through the SSO. It's SORA. There's there's there are several through the public library. If you go to the Montgomery County Library Systems website, there are usually, I haven't looked in a while, but usually there are links to other online digital libraries that you can access. And a lot of those, not only will they put the text up on the screen for your child to read, but a lot of them will also read it to your child. So maybe you have a young reader who's struggling and working through books, but also would benefit from hearing good reading and what that sounds like. They can be read to as well as read. So there are great options either way. I just like the idea of holding that book in the hand and turning the pages, and kids get a lot of screen time right now anyway. So if you can do it that way, it kind of cuts down on some of that eye strain, screen time kind of a situation.
Yes.
But if you can't, don't feel guilty about that.
Yep.
There are great options out there for you.
You do what you can. I do like the physical book. I like the convenience of, it being digital. Only just because, obviously, you can be at a restaurant, you could be somewhere, and it's like, boom, there's a book. But then also, we know technology has its, cons with notifications and things that come, you get sidetracked, and you're like, oh, let me go look at this, So we want them to stay focused. Well, we thank you so much, Tammy, for your time today. Thank you for being a great blessing to our campus and helping our parents really grow as a reading family. This is part 1, so we will have part 2 where we talk about dyslexia. So I know some of y'all were like, yeah, but my child, struggles even more. And so we're going to actually have our campus dyslexic teacher, Ms. DeVolder. She's so awesome. Kind of give us some ideas and some strategies to help some of our students that may have dyslexia as a challenge, and we're going to still move forward because the thing is that we can still grow. So we thank you for tuning in to our Get Right with Miss Wright, and we'll see you on the next one.